My name is Emily. At the time I was 42 years old, and my husband Michael was 44. We had an 8-year-old son who had just started school, and we loved him with all our hearts. Spending time with him was everything to us. Our family was always close. Since childhood, I had thought that Michael's life always followed a smooth path, and that everything seemed to work in his favor. Physically, I was always seen as an attractive woman. My beautiful face and striking figure often drew compliments wherever I went. We were both about 25 when we met, and since then, we had been inseparable. The countless experiences we shared and the stories we lived together became the foundation of our relationship. To be honest, our relationship had always been harmonious and quite traditional. Yet, we were never afraid to try new things. We were always together and in sync with each other. I mention this because sometimes the future has a way of changing everything. At this point, I need to talk about my husband's best friend, Daniel. Daniel would become the person who opened the door to a new world for me. Daniel had been Michael's childhood friend. They saw each other as brothers. But now, as I write this, I wonder, would a brother secretly be with the other's wife? I'm not sure. I had known Daniel for almost 20 years. Since I had been with Michael, Daniel had always been a handsome and charismatic man. Over time, he became even more attractive than my husband, because he took great care of his appearance and style. Between us, there had always been a normal relationship. He had never shown any inclination to cross a line, and there were never any ambiguous feelings between us. Despite his charm and wit, Daniel never appeared as a potential partner or lover. This was because his relationships usually ended after 4 or 5 months, and he would immediately move on to the next. One time, a friend of mine fell madly in love with Daniel, and I had to talk her out of it. Daniel's relationships always had an expiration date. Personally, this didn't bother me. In some ways, I might even say Daniel was more intelligent and attractive than my husband. Now that I've explained how things unfolded, let's go back to that evening. Michael wanted to talk to me that night. As usual, I was lying in bed. Our son was sleeping in the next room, and I was ready to spend some relaxing time with my husband. But something felt different that night. Michael said he wanted to share something personal with me. Within minutes, he confessed a fantasy he had been keeping to himself for years, seeing his wife in bed with another man. For about 10 minutes, Michael explained this fantasy and how he had tried to hide it because he didn't want me to stop loving him, but he could no longer keep it a secret. He also assured me that it was fine if I chose not to entertain the idea. As you might expect, being a more traditional woman, I thought it was a joke. The idea of my husband wanting something like this didn't sit well with me, and I rejected his request. That night I went to bed upset. However, the next day, Michael brought it up again. This time he was more open and sincere. He explained what this fantasy meant to him, why it troubled him, and how he felt incomplete without fulfilling it. Because I loved Michael and valued honesty in our relationship, I tried to keep an open mind. Still, the thought of bringing this idea to life deeply unsettled me. Even so, I continued the conversation to respect his feelings. For weeks, this topic came up occasionally. Michael said his fantasy had become an obsession, and that our marriage might suffer if we didn't act on it. This put me under immense emotional pressure because his happiness mattered to me. But fulfilling this request went against my values. Michael's persistence forced me to seriously consider the idea, despite my reservations. One day, Michael made a suggestion. He thought Daniel might be the right person for this. I was utterly shocked. Michael wanted to bring this up to Daniel and talk to him about it. I found it hard to believe my husband could go this far. However, because of his persistence, I reluctantly agreed to let the conversation happen. Michael talked to Daniel, and to my surprise, Daniel didn't react as negatively as I had expected. A few days later, Daniel came over for dinner. During the conversation, Michael carefully brought up the subject and openly presented our proposal to Daniel. Initially, Daniel looked shocked and hesitant, but once he realized Michael was serious, he began to warm up to the idea. At that moment, I knew my life would never be the same. In the days that followed, Michael, Daniel, and I had long discussions about how to proceed. We talked about my boundaries, my feelings, and how I would handle everything. Michael's persistence and Daniel's easygoing demeanor made my emotional turmoil even more complex. Eventually, I decided to go through with it. When the night came, I was filled with mixed emotions. On one hand, I told myself I was doing this for Michael's happiness. On the other, I felt an indescribable unease. Daniel's confidence and Michael's excitement only intensified my internal conflict. Everything we had planned unfolded as expected, yet the emotions I experienced during the process deeply affected me. I constantly questioned myself, wondering if I was doing the right thing. Michael seemed happy, but I felt alienated. It felt like a turning point in our marriage. The events of that night led me to see Michael and our marriage in a new light. I realized how much it hurt me to compromise my boundaries and values for Michael's happiness. While trying to make sense of everything, I understood that Michael's happiness should not come at the expense of my emotional well-being. The next day, I decided to talk to Michael about how this had impacted our marriage. I openly expressed how challenging this had been for me, the hurt I felt, and my disappointment. For the first time, it seemed like Michael truly listened to me. He shared how happy the experience had made him, but admitted he was sorry for disregarding my feelings. That conversation was one of the most honest and open moments in our marriage. The process of truly trying to understand each other brought a new awareness to our relationship. After everything, Michael and I decided that we would never engage in anything that made either of us uncomfortable again. This experience taught me the importance of boundaries and that love, even when it involves sacrifice, should never come at the cost of personal values. What happened between Michael and me became an opportunity to re-evaluate the dynamics of our relationship. After this process, we made a conscious effort to be more sensitive, respectful, and open with each other. Over time, the unrest inside me gradually started to fade away. The difficult period I went through with Michael taught me something. I had to guide my life without losing myself, while also respecting the needs of others. However, during this process, Daniel's presence started to play an increasingly important role in my life. Daniel had been my friend for a long time, but recently, our relationship had taken on a different dimension. He was the most reliable person in my life. I filled the emptiness inside me by talking to Daniel, and I found peace when I was with him. Among the confusion I experienced in my marriage to Michael, the understanding and patience that Daniel offered me began to make a difference over time. One day, Daniel confessed his feelings to me. I had understood the love he felt for me, but honestly, I had also started to feel the same way about him. This was not something I had expected. Being in a deep commitment-like marriage can lead to complex thoughts in one's emotional world. But at that moment, I realized that in my relationship with Daniel, he accepted me completely. Every moment spent with him was filling the gaps inside me. In my relationship with Michael, even though we had spent many years together, the love I had once felt had been replaced by something else. The time I spent with Daniel reminded me what happiness and peace really meant. And this time, there was someone beside me who did not try to understand me, but accepted me as I was. I decided to have one last conversation with Michael. Putting aside the years we had spent together and the difficulties we had faced, I told him that our relationship had to come to an end. Michael, with a sense of shock and a bit of sadness, accepted my decision. Although we loved each other, we had matured enough to realize that we were no longer suited for each other as partners. A few weeks later, I noticed that my relationship with Daniel had become more serious. The bond between us grew stronger. The love and respect we had for each other led us to decide to take the step towards marriage. Making this decision was not easy, but I felt at peace with my choice. Deciding to marry Daniel marked a new turning point in my life. The life we would build together would transform both my life and Daniel's. Everything between us progressed naturally. When I accepted his marriage proposal, seeing the happiness in Daniel's eyes was a sign to me that I had also found peace within myself. One day we held our wedding. Surrounded by family, friends, and loved ones, we spent the day in love and peace. There were hopes and excitement for the new life we would share together. Our marriage was a new step, overcoming past experiences and difficulties. The past with Michael would always have a place in my life, but the new life I would begin with Daniel would truly bring me peace and happiness. The old wounds in my heart had now been replaced with a new love. Thank you for listening to this life story of mine. Don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear your perspective on the journey of personal growth, love, and transformation. Stay loving,